Governor Sethaput, thank you so much for joining us. What are you expecting to hear from Powell? Might he push back on expectations of rate cuts this year?
Oh, Haslinda, I think everybody and their cousin is commenting on what Chairman Powell is likely to do. I don't have any particularly deep insight on that, so I'll spare you my views.
Some say that, you know what, forget about rate cuts, that could see rate hikes this year. Are you prepared for that? How concerned are you about further tightening by the Fed?
Yeah, for us, our goal, right, is to try to minimize the impact on Thailand. And so we've been trying to ensure that our buffers are quite strong. And so I think we're fairly well positioned in terms of managing if the Fed were to continue to hike or to stay higher for longer, as some people expect. If you look at the baht, yes, it has been quite volatile as of late, but I think, again, part of that reflects not just what was happening with global factors like the United States and with the yuan, but also what was happening on the political front. And now that we have a government, hopefully that volatility will be a bit lessened going forward.
You've done 175, a 9-year high. I mean, there are expectations that you are perhaps close to ending the tightening. How close are you to that? You say you're close to equilibrium.
Yeah, we're getting there. You know, as you saw from our last MPC, we changed the language in the policy statement. Before, we described a policy objective as trying to ensure a smooth takeoff, and we feel that we've done that. And consistent with that was we wanted to try to normalize rates in a gradual and measured fashion. We took out that language to indicate that we are at an inflection point. We're getting closer now to where we want to be, and so the objective now is shifting more towards trying to get the landing right and sticking the landing. And for that, what we'd like to see in terms of an outcome is we'd like to see our growth stay in that 3 to 4% range, which is what we see is our long-term potential growth rate, and also to get inflation within our target range of 1 to 3%. I think on the inflation front, we're fairly comfortable that we'll get there. In fact, if the latest inflation outturns came out quite soft, as you know, the headline was at 0.4%, but we feel that that'll gradually come back within range because core is still tracking at 0.9%, and there's still upside risk to inflation in Thailand, impact from El Nino and new government policies and whatnot. So we do expect inflation to come back within that 1 to 3% range in a sustainable fashion. Growth, as you know, is disappointed. The latest second quarter GDP number came out softer than we expected at 1.8%. We were expecting something soft, but it came out even softer than expected. And so we'll be revising our headline forecast for GDP in September with the new monetary policy report. And we had a 3.6% number out there that'll have to come back down.
Might you revise your projection even lower given the economic malaise in China?
Well, the latest figure that we have out there is 3.6%. So that's going to come down, as we said, from the GDP outturns that have been weak. Part of the weakness has been, a lot of it has to do with a softer than expected contribution to services, from services, and in particular tourism. The tourist arrivals, they've been coming in terms of arrivals, but their spending has been less than expected. Part of this, again, is fewer than expected Chinese tourists. The Chinese tourists tend to spend more. So, yes, we are very tied to what happens in China. On the export front, again, the China slowdown obviously hits our exports as with other countries in the region. Any kind of China slowdown will obviously expect to impact the export outlook and have implications for that revised GDP figure that we'll be putting out come September.
As you said earlier, Thailand has a new government under Prime Minister Seta. Pheu Thai Party has said that it wants to disburse cash via digital payments, and that amounts to perhaps 14 billion US dollars. That's a huge amount. Will that translate to higher inflation in the country?
Yes, if it happens, there's no doubt it'll add additional pressure to headline inflation in Thailand. But I think it's still early days. It's a coalition government, and we need to figure out which which parties can be in charge of which ministry, how the cabinet is going to be, responsibilities are going to be divided up. And that'll give us better indications to the kind of which policies are likely to be implemented, and also the details about how and exactly which policies and how they're going to be implemented. I think a lot of details are still unclear at this point, so it'd be a bit premature for me to assess exactly what the impact of those policies will be on our forecasts and our policy response.
The thing is, fiscal policy might undo what monetary is trying to do. How are you safeguarding that?
Well, right now, I mean, as we've been communicating, I think quite consistently, we think the important thing on the policy front, both on the monetary and on the fiscal side, is to try to normalize policies and get some more consolidation. On the fiscal side, I think we've done a lot of fiscal stimulus during COVID, appropriately so, but now it's a time to rebuild our buffers and get public debt on a more attractive trajectory. And the same thing on the monetary front. Again, trying to normalize policies consistent with what's appropriate for a longer-term scenario. And I think while we're quite comfortable that we're going to do that on the monetary front, again, remains to be seen what will happen on the fiscal front.
You talked about how it's been volatile for the baht. It's down about 2% year to date versus the USD. What measures are in store for currency stability?
Haslinda, the thing that matters most for the baht movements and baht volatility is what happens actually outside the country, what happens, including here at Jackson Hole, what Chairman Powell will say, because most of the baht volatility has been tied to movements in the dollar, first and foremost. The second thing that's been mattered a lot for the baht as of late is what's been happening with the yuan. So anytime, because the Thai economy is seen as being very tied to the Chinese one, every time the yuan tends to appreciate, the baht tends to move in line with that. So those are the two factors that matter most for what happens with the baht. And recently, as I mentioned, the political situation has had also an additional impact on the baht. For us, again, in terms of managing the impact of the volatility on the economy and whatnot, the issue is trying to ensure stability. So trying to make sure that our buffers remain strong and that the shocks that come in from global financial markets and whatnot don't get amplified into the economy.
Is there a red line in the sand, and what baht level would you consider intervening in a big way? No
lines in the sand. We have no predetermined level for the baht. We've moved a long way from those pre-1997 days. What we do, as you know, is when the baht does move excessively and in a manner that's not underpinned by fundamentals, then we will engage in some intervention to try to smooth out some of that volatility. Again, not to try to move the baht to any kind of predetermined level, but just try to smooth out the volatility, because one thing that we do see in Thailand is that we are an economy that's very open, very susceptible to these movements, and a lot of our exporters, because they're small and medium-sized firms, don't hedge.
Governor, before we let you go, I want to talk about the structural shifts in the global economy. Your views on that. What are the pressure points? What are the areas of concerns?
Yeah, there are a lot of moving parts now, I think, on the global economy. A lot of global shifts happening and a lot of moving parts, and they're not all moving in the right direction. I point to three. First, I think, and most clearly on the global front, global growth rates have come down. Prior to 2010, if you look at that 2010 period, the global economy was growing at 3.5%. Since 2010, it's come down to 2.5%, so it's clearly on a slower trajectory now. And second point is it's also not only is growth slower, but it's also more precarious now. If we look at debt levels, both public and private, as a share of global GDP, it's at historic levels. It's historic highs. It's about 250% now. And if you look at, again, what's happening with interest rates staying higher for longer and that slowdown in growth that we talked about, that doesn't seem to indicate that those high debt levels are likely to come down quickly anytime soon. And the third thing, which gets a lot of press, as you know, is what's happening on the global trade front. Global trade, as share of GDP, peaked way back in 2009, and it's come down. Now there's, and in addition to that, now there's talk about rejigging and reconfiguring all the supply chains and whatnot, which is bound to be disruptive. And that also will impact, I think, a lot particularly for small open economies like us.
Governor Sethaput, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.